publication, we'll get it in the newspapers, we'll put word out loud and clear. But the fact that when you're in a class and it's certified, you don't have to do anything to remain in the class. So it would be long down the road when it would be time to sort of realize the benefits of the settlement that you would be in a position of establishing.
I'm asking because we're Parchment residents, this is my husband.
Not the way you have it currently defined, and I feel like you've got probably enough information to make an educated guess about when it probably was in the water, and I feel like you want to, as quickly as you can, change your class to include a scope of use. It doesn't have to be the longest that you can shoot for, but I think if you've got the...
Well, as of right now, we're entitled to take complete, so there's no benefit to changing the class definition before you move for class certification. It doesn't change who's in the case, it doesn't change the discovery that we can take, it doesn't change any of our legal strategy whatsoever.
Specifically for us, I'm asking because we bought our house in 2011 around the block from my mother-in-law who lived there for 29 years and raised my husband and my sister-in-law in that house. So it's not just me and us, it's my entire family of in-laws that live there. They literally sold their house 6 months before this happened.
80% of us have been gone
So,
just outside of the window.
Right.
You did a much bigger now, that's all I'm saying.
We totally understand that. We're on exactly the same page here. We desperately want to include everyone that we can reasonably put into the case, and it's just going to be a matter of making those proofs to the court's satisfaction. So, but as of right now, there would be no reason to amend the case definition, the class definition, because it doesn't change anything up until the time that we move to have the class certified. Does that make sense?
If I can add to that, I think it's important that you guys, you said you wanted any supplemental information, that this community and everyone knows here has undergone a big shift in maybe the last 5 to 10 years, where a lot of people have lived here their entire lives that worked at the mill, have either passed away or have moved. The prior residents of our home lived there 49 years, and the neighbors next door lived there 50 years, and one of them has passed away since, one of them had cancer. I mean, we're talking people who have lived their entire lifetimes. You know, a lot of us younger folks here are, some of us are newcomers, and we just happen to be, I guess, in the right place at the right time. But you really need to understand and advocate for those people that have spent their entire lives in this community because they worked there, they've drank this water, raised their kids. So the judge, just get through to the judge that this is a special circumstance, that Parchment just happens to be, when they found it, happened to be right after a lot of people have left the community.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I'm going to repeat that probably verbatim to the judge.
Sure.
But I mean, I want everybody to know that our investigation is going to, for every reason, we want to know as much as we can about how and when this got into the water, and we want to be able to include everybody who's been in it. So, yes.
Will 3M have to, will you have to be able to prove negligence?
So for 3M, it's a little bit different. The 3M claims are constrained by a tort reform statute in Michigan called the Products Liability Statute. So negligence is part of it, but there are other factors that go into it with 3M as well. It's sort of a more complicated. You have to clear a lot of different legal hurdles about what they knew about it at the time that they were producing it, and whether there were safe alternatives available, and some things like that. One of our claims against both Georgia Pacific entities is negligence. So for those things, we will have to prove negligence. But there are a number of different legal theories that we're proceeding under. Yes.
My wife and I live on Keys Drive. Thank you guys for many years. And we have a family member that lived in Flint, and we had to go help my mother-in-law for 6 years, so we were exposed to the Flint water. Then they sold that house and we moved back here, and then the next week we found out that this water is contaminated after we dealt with the Flint.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we don't know what now.
So if you were here when the discovery was made, then you would be included in this class action if it is certified. And I know that there are a number of cases going on still involving the Flint water contamination. And I'd be happy to share with you some of the information about that. Yes?
So if it becomes
Okay,
class,
okay.
if it becomes class certified, and so you just mail, like, the group that you reach out to be a part of the class lawsuit, they just have to respond that they wanna be a part of it, or? how
No,
does that
so,
work?
class actions in the federal level are opt-out class actions instead of opt-in class actions, which means you're automatically included unless you take affirmative steps by filling out paperwork to opt out. So you wouldn't have to do anything to remain a class member. Yeah, that's probably as much as you're gonna wanna know there.
I guess I'm just gonna ask this publicly to this group, were you aware that Parchment did look for, additional locations for their wells a few years back?
Yeah, we've got some documentation of that, and we've discussed that with a couple of
Because
people.
that's obviously going to come into play, they're gonna try to throw, municipality under the bus.
Yeah.
As far as being partially responsible.
Yeah, and I mean, for sure they will, but if they wanna take the position that the city should have moved their wells because they knew we were polluting it, then we're gonna welcome that, from a litigation perspective. But, yeah, I mean, they're gonna point the finger everywhere they can except for at themselves, although I will say, in some of our early proceedings, in the status conferences, Georgia Pacific's general counsel was asked point blank by the judge, well, what does this study say? And I expected some equivocating answer, and he basically said, well, it shows that we were a source of contamination in the water, which was, surprising. So I think they know how serious it is, at least Georgia Pacific does. Whether that ends up meaning anything.
Are they still taking samples here, do you know?
So my understanding is that the sampling program for the Tetra Tech study is done. I don't know whether the state has plans to take any additional samples, but we've got all of the data that was drawn from the Tetra Tech samples, and we've got our experts going through that. And it's a really robust data set. It's a lot. So.
He didn't know anything.
Okay.
So, do I wait for you, or do you?
So yeah, I think we're wrapping up with the group here really quickly, and if you want, I know they wouldn't have known about your situation. If you want me to just give you a call tomorrow so you folks can get out of here, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, we left a number with,
Okay, well, I've got it. I mean, I have all your information, so I'd be happy to give you a call tomorrow morning. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay,
that'd be fine, thanks, Mike.
absolutely. Thanks. Have a great night.
You too.
Yes.
So, speaking of the city, what communication have you had with them, and as far as their involvement with this process?
No direct communication whatsoever. A lot of folks. Sorry?
Is that common?
Yeah. So one reason is that it would probably have to happen through council. And I don't think we would get a lot of useful information about them. We've had plenty of discussions with folks who have asked us why we're not suing the city and why they're not part of this. Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? If every single resident of the city sues the city, guess what happens if you win a big judgment? You just paid yourself. So, and I'm gonna feel awful bad taking a fee, so I wouldn't. And so that's one of them. But the other is that it's really, really hard to sue governments in Michigan. There are only a handful of exceptions to what's called governmental immunity, where basically the government is immune from being sued. So even if there was some giant pot of money there, or insurance money, or something like that, we probably wouldn't be able to get to it unless we could prove one of those exceptions, which it's fairly rare in these kinds of circumstances. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm on a plat that, everybody's on a well. We're, far enough away from the concentration that, they really didn't do any testing out where we were.
Okay.
And, towards Mount Olivet, in G. So, yet I had mine done anyway, paid for it out of my pocket. It's contaminated, but I'm not part of the suit, apparently.
Not as the class is currently
Not as the
constituted, and
But here's the twist. They're gonna run city water through our plat now.
okay, so that is another twist. I'd be happy to speak with you separately about that. What I can tell you is that in general, if you have a contaminated private well, oftentimes those are cases that are worth bringing individually, depending on the level of contamination and a couple of other things. And I'd be happy to talk with you that sort of out of the group setting, or if you want to give me a call at the office, if you don't want to stick around that long, I'd be happy to discuss it with you. But those cases can and sometimes are brought individually. And then the idea that they may be running through your property, that's a separate issue, but one we could also probably discuss. Yes.
I have a question. The old time is like my great-grandfather, John Flam. He was a boiler, he worked in the boiler room at the old mill, okay? And he told my grandfather, Clarence Roy Flam, and my grandfather told me about the stories that they used to dump back in the back of the old mill with the oil drums. Now, my question is this. Do you have the capabilities of issuing some kind of tests on that property to make a solid, give a solid, definite answer to the community? Because it seems that Jeff Sorensen and company, okay, I'm going to put him on the spot because I've had talks with the guy, okay, doesn't know the answer to that. So I'm going to ask you that question. Do you have the power to turn around and have somebody to test the soil back there and see if the old timers' stories are true, the ones that are still alive?
So, in a civil lawsuit, in a federal civil proceeding, you can do what's called basically a request for an inspection, where you can force a defendant to allow you on the property, or you can force a third party through a subpoena to allow you on a property to conduct testing. At this stage of the case, particularly before the class certification stage of the case, because there's a significant amount of discovery that's left for after class cert, what I would suggest is that the data that we have right now about where the contamination came from is robust and sufficient for our purposes. So it's not something that I would anticipate doing at this stage of the case. But it is possible that we would be in a position where we would want to gather more data down the road, and there are legal mechanisms for doing that.
And the other thing I want to point out, if indeed the tales are true, especially if you talk to some of the old timers around the area that are still alive, that have worked like in my great-grandfather's era, that can confirm it, and you find out that there was actual polluted soil or even buried oil drums, like some of the people that live down over by Remus Street. There's a gentleman that lives around there too, where my great-grandfather used to have a house. What can be done about it is my question. Can you force the people that own the mill, the land around it, to shut it down completely, like knock the building down, or what can be done about it?
So, there's a lot of what ifs there, and I would hesitate to get too far over my skis and speculate too much. It would have a lot to do with the when, what, where, and how of that, the who owned it at the time, the what contaminants are we talking about. That could incorporate everything from federal Superfund liability to state tort law, and there are too many unknowns for me to really give you a good answer. I hate to not give you a solid answer on that, but almost everything in the law is a maybe, and that's a big if and a big maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask, because I had a few people come and ask me about this. How did you, if I can ask, become, associated with Parchment?
Sure. So our firm handles environmental contamination class actions all over the country. Parchment's actually only one of 2 cases I have in the state of Michigan right now. We're a Detroit-based law firm. This fits our specialty of the type of case that we do, and functionally compared to the rest of the cases that we do, Parchment's our backyard. The state of Michigan is our home park, and we think that we're probably the most experienced, qualified environmental class action firm, maybe anywhere, but certainly in the state of Michigan, in terms of having successfully resolved a lot of different types of environmental contamination cases. So this is something that we had some folks reach out to us on very early on after this was discovered. We started our investigation very early. I mean, when we filed our complaint, I don't think anybody had written about, publicly about how Georgia Pacific might be liable for this, how the chain of sort of corporate entities went that led to Georgia Pacific Consumer Products LP and Georgia Pacific being somewhat responsible for this, how the migration had happened. So we were on this very, very early because it's something that's important to us, being in our home state and being, right in the wheelhouse of the kind of case we
So they
take.
reached out to you first?
I'm sorry?
So you had citizens reach out to you first?
So in this instance, I think we had a number of phone calls, and I'm not going to remember the exact chronology, but very soon after it happened, we started our investigation and mailed out a first round of the data sheets that folks have filled out today. and started contacting some folks back. So I can't recall the exact chronology. Sometimes folks reach out to us first. Sometimes we put feelers out first. I don't know exactly what it was, and I don't want to give you a wrong answer.
Sure, and can I real quick address him, Michael? Parchment is still in the process of trying to take over the mill property, and they're kind of battling, River Reach, who owned property, who's based out of Colorado, and they've kind of disappeared. Well, now there's been interest by a local trucking yard to take that property and to buy it. They said initially they wanted to buy it from Parchment, then I think they didn't get a very favorable response from Parchment, so then they went directly and kind of threw a wrench in the negotiations between Parchment and River Reach. So now it's Parchment kind of fighting, with money that they don't really have, trying to advocate so that we can get that property back, so that we can do the right thing with it. I've spoken with our US Senator about, on a federal level, making it so that these properties can't change hands without being cleaned up, because essentially a trucking yard could just park trucks there and just leave it forever until we force the state and federal government to, force cleanup. So Parchment, they're doing what they can with the funds that they have, and it just all takes time and hopefully a little bit of intervention from the state and the federal government.
Who owns the old mill anyways now?
River Reach.
It's River Reach, and they were basically a developer that intended to redevelop the property, or instead they intended to develop the property.
Is there any sort of information from them about what they may have found, or why they chose to not develop the property and pull out?
Not at this time, but I anticipate that that's going to be part of our discovery process at some point in the case.
I'd like to know why they're playing hardball and not give a reasonable price to the city of Parchment to have the property returned to them.
Yeah, that I don't know. I don't know, what the negotiations may have been like. We're not privy to them.
I think it's Barnum dealing with that.
Yeah.
It's a whole different law firm, so.
And what are they going to do if if the stories are true with the old timers and the soil around the foundation is extremely
Well, I
polluted?
mean, we know that the soil's contaminated, right? I mean, the test results of the Tetra Tech show that the soil's contaminated with, at the very least, PFAS.
Yeah, but where are they going to put it, though, is my question.
That's something I just couldn't venture a guess.
And the scientists don't even know, because
Right.
you move from one landfill to another, and
Right.
it's lined with some sort of probably PFAS, that's.
Yeah, I mean, and good luck finding a landfill that's, willing to take PFAS contaminated soil right now. It's not
Yeah,
gonna happen.
they need to focus on how to break down these compounds, and they're doing what they can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I didn't realize you're as it is. Can you?
Well, I don't know if I was going that far.
Can you tell us about some verdicts that you've had, and what the judgment was as far as for the?
So there are almost never, I can only think of, I don't even know if I can think of one, environmental class actions that go to verdict. It's very, very, very rare for these things to go to trial. The reason is because the leverage that's created and the risk that's created on behalf of the defendant creates enormous pressure for them to settle. That's why we pursue these cases as class actions. So I don't have a jury verdict in an environmental class action. No one at my firm has one, but I don't know anybody in the country that's got
So
one.
I meant like settlements, whatever.
Sure.
where-
Yeah, I mean, we recently settled an odor nuisance air pollution case in Southern California for $9.5 million for 1,000 people who were just dealing with hydrogen sulfide odors from a landfill. That's probably my most recent one, but we've got dozens of those. We've also been involved in a lot of infrastructure litigation with sewage backups in the state of Michigan. Steve Liddell, who you heard from is in the hallway, actually lobbied to have, so we were talking about exceptions to governmental immunity, he lobbied to have a separate one passed so that folks could hold their municipality responsible when the sewage backs up into it. And we've settled dozens of those cases. I would say that the firm has probably settled at least 100 environmental class actions. Yes? Oh, did you have a question? Yes?
So you said earlier that your database might be faulty for the amount of people that should be,
No. So,
I mean, I didn't get a letter.
okay, so no.
Who got a letter and
So what
How
we
is
did
that
is
working?
we mailed letters to a population of people that we hope very strongly overlaps with people who are on the municipal water system. This is just a database it was literally for the purpose of just mailing out letters to let folks know about the case and about the meeting specifically. If you didn't get a letter, if you give us a data sheet, you will be specifically added into the database and you'll be kept informed about developments in the case. But there's no significance as it relates to the case itself between folks that we mailed a letter to and didn't, if that makes sense. So it doesn't have anything to do with whether you would be in the case or not, it's just, those were publicly available addresses that we
Okay, that's
pulled.
what I'm
Yeah.
trying to get at, I guess, is what data you were using is.
Yeah, it's from a service that we use, for obtaining addresses, just for trying to get, simple notice out for things like a meeting. Yes?
So we can email you personally?
Yes.
And, you know, if somebody wants a letter in the data form, they can get it from you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to send those out
What
to
was your
anybody who
name again?
requests them. My name is Nick Coulson, Coulson.
Thank
If
you.
you got the letter there, that's probably
Thank
me
you.
that
Yes, I
signed
do.
it.
Someone else did, but I'll put your name in.
Okay. One of us had cards, but I think they ran off of them. Anybody else, any other questions? I'm happy if you want to bring individual questions, we'll be sticking around for a little bit here, until they kick us out, so, yes.
What if, you are diagnosed with, ovarian cancer, one of the things, like coming up like recently, or, coming up soon, would that person then try to get another attorney?
Yeah, so we'd be happy to speak with anyone. Like I said, we're gonna be, planning to bring a number of those cases individually, separately from the class action. Or you could speak with an attorney, who specializes in personal injury.
And I'd say no, just talking to gentlemen out there, like the personal ones, you would prefer them to be residents and part of the class action, is that correct?
No, it doesn't, not necessarily, not 100%. I mean, if it's somebody who's been exposed to a significant amount of the water and there's a legitimate medical opinion that ties, the causation, to the exposure, then not necessarily.
Where would you get that medical opinion?
So if your own doctor didn't give it to you, certainly if we thought that there was something worth looking into there, we could look at having, a toxicologist or a medical doctor.
So I'll share my history a little bit. I've worked in Parchment for 20 years, drank the coffee, whatever, probably drank as much of that water as I had at home in the morning. I was diagnosed and I've been treated for colon cancer.
I'm sorry.
So is that a case you would take, or would you?
So we'd have to talk a little bit more, specifically about it. It's something we'd be happy to discuss with you and look into, but I can't.
Why? The medical records don't say what caused it.
Right. So that's something we'd be happy to look into with you, absolutely. But,
Lawyer.
sorry?
You could submit your medical records to a lawyer.
Right, then that would be one of the things that we talk about, but, I'm happy to have that discussion with you, absolutely. Yes?
Is there a comprehensive evaluation of all the diseases that PFAS cause?
There are, it's sort of a patchwork right now. There are a number of them. So a lot of you have probably heard about what was called the C8 litigation that happened in West Virginia a number of years ago, and there was a settlement. So C8 is one of the two PFAS chemicals. It's another name for one of the two PFAS chemicals that are the predominant ones that were discovered in the water here in Parchment. And in Parkersburg, West Virginia, there were a series of settlements, but one large class action settlement where part of the settlement was that they conducted a science panel to determine probable links with certain illnesses. That's sort of the leading scientific evidence on this, but there are also separate academic studies that have been done that have found causal links or probable causal links with some of the additional ones. So not all of those necessarily appear in the C8 study, but some of them appear in other places, but there is no sort of Bible of what it is, because it's still an emerging science, and because one of the really awful things here is the degree to which 3M prevented anybody from finding out how bad this was. There would have inevitably been way more studies about it, way more research, and we'd know a lot more if every time a warning sign trickled up that, hey, something's really bad here, 3M didn't completely bury it. I mean, literally paying someone who was the director of a scientific journal to bury bad evidence that came up about this. That's one of the main reasons.
C8?
The C8, yeah.
The letter C and the number 8?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. So, and there's actually a whole website, if you just Google C8 study, and it all came about as a result of the settlement in Parkersburg.
Thank you.
Yes?
Do you know how many elements they, as far as the PFAS, that would be tested for? That's one of the questions.
In water or blood?
Well, it would be a blood test.
Okay, so right, if you had a blood test done, so you can order different ones. You can order a total PFAS compounds test, you can order a PFOA test, you can order a PFOS test. Those are,
comment.
Well, and it's something that just a lot of doctors and a lot of labs just aren't familiar with,
Well,
because
the
it's,
doctor, they denied the orders at the hospital.
okay, yeah, so I'm happy to give you the name, actually, I mean, I'll just tell you, the name of the laboratory that we've used is Vista Analytical.
That's the one he's not.
And that's who the state of Michigan uses. But we had to, I mean, beat their door down to get Bronson just to even draw the blood samples to ship out there. And they gave us heck at every turn after they'd agreed to do it, and after they told me it was gonna be fine, and so I know that it can be a challenge to get it done. But that is one of the,
And Nick Ronson won't do it anymore.
no, they closed the door right behind us on that. So,
They denied mine.
yeah, yeah.
How many compounds do they even test for anyway? Aren't there like 5,000?
Yeah, so the blood serum tests that are available, there's one for PFOS, there's one for PFOA, and then there's one I think that just generally covers all PFAS compounds. So you could get a
But it's not gonna cover the ones that are like in gas form, some of the, I mean, there's all sorts of.
so you're gonna test the limits of my scientific knowledge there. I know that it tests for like at least hundreds of them. I know that it tests for some of the more common ones like Gen X, things like that. But here particularly, I mean, the predominant ones that we're worried about are PFOS and PFOA. And so those are the ones that we've been looking at. Anybody else? You don't have to stay till 9 if you're, if anybody has places to be. Yes? Yeah, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you. We had a slide about it, and, but yeah, I'd be happy to discuss that with you, and, the things that we know that are associated with it in terms of ailments.
And another one that wasn't mentioned was lowered vaccine efficiency.
Yes.
So for anyone that has kids or grandkids, even if your kids are a little bit older and they receive their vaccines while on that water, they can always go to their doctor and get a titer to make sure that they do have immunity to those diseases that they were supposed to be vaccinated for, which,
We need to hire you, but
now they're,
yes.
now they're finding out in adulthood that some people, well, their vaccine didn't take and we don't know why, and now this is coming out. I mean, we could have 40, 50-year-old people that need new MMR vaccines.
Yes. Yeah, and that's tough from a lawsuit personal injury standpoint, obviously, because then you've got another layer of sort of deferred causation. But yeah, I mean, it is another thing to keep an eye on, and frankly, we don't know the list of things to keep an eye on. We just know some of them. We know what we know right now, but we don't know
And
what
that's
we don't.
one you can do something about. You can
Yeah.
always get your titers,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Came in late, but, over this past weekend, they were saying the water's better, it really is not.
Oh, we didn't claim it. So we're just so you know, we're private lawyers. We're on everybody's side here. I'm not claiming anything about any water being good or nothing at all.
But you know that like, for our infant, the youngest granddaughter, the infant, I had to go back and, okay, well, let me boil the water, because, she was going so much. It's like, she be okay, so, they give us baby water, and she breastfed, and when I went back and boiled it, she spit up, she did less, like trying to get.
So I know that there have been some folks with particularized sort of household issues about lead contamination, potential lead service lines. And just so you know, our case only includes PFAS contamination. What I can tell you, I'm never going to sign off on anybody's water quality ever again in the state of Michigan, ever. But what I can tell you is that, Parchment's municipal system has been switched over to Kalamazoo's water that has been tested for PFAS, and it is within, the state regulatory law. So, I don't know that any of us are ever gonna confidently drink from the tap again in this state. But what I can tell you is that at least as to the things we're concerned about in this case, there's reason to believe that the problem is not there.
Just to be clear, I don't think boiling has any effect on people.
No, or lead. I would say that, if you have concerns about that, I would urge you maybe to contact the state and see if you can have your water tested for, potentially, other contaminants. It could be any number of things. Yes.
What are acceptable levels? Does that mean it's still in the city water?
So it depends who you ask, what acceptable levels are. The state is sort of having that debate on an unnecessary political level right now. There are a lot of experts who suggest that the level should be a lot lower, a lot more protective than they are currently. I can't recall off the top of my head what Kalamazoo detected, other than I know that they were very, very low if they were even getting detected for the most
Was
part.
there, oh, you don't.
I just can't recall. I'd be happy, if you want to give a call at the office, I'd be happy to look that back up. I know we have that information, but
I think they said single digit.
yeah, I mean,
But it's still in there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we
so-
had- I mean, we still have that lead.
99.9% of the people on this planet have PFAS in their blood. And because it's so ubiquitous, I mean, it's everywhere, it's in everything, and it doesn't break down in the environment and it bioaccumulates. So, everyone's got some. The idea is you're not supposed to have, and you shouldn't have any, but you especially shouldn't have the levels that you tend to see in populations where people are directly ingesting it in the water, which are quite a bit higher than in the general population.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll be here to answer any individual questions anybody might have. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate everybody's participation. And feel free to give us a call at the office and ask for either myself, Nick, or Matt, or Steve, and we'd be happy to speak with you anytime. Oh, give them to us and we'll take them, and this will allow us to keep you informed about the progression of the case. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you coming.
Case for personal case because I wasn't a resident. It was part of the class action.
Okay, so there may have been wires crossed there. Why don't we, do you have a minute to sit down and talk? Okay, let me get through some of the quicker, easier questions, and then I'm happy to discuss that with you. We'll probably have to have some follow-up on it. Sure. Do you work in healthcare, I assume, or?
No, I'm just, I'll email you.
Okay, cool, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I know.
I can get you, I'll get the slide on that page for you, and you can see, but it's not an exhaustive list, these are just some of the things that we're looking at that are potentially, so, yeah.
I can just open it up on
I would start with the C8 study.
C8?
Yeah, the letter C, the number 8 study, that's sort of the most authoritative, literature on the subject. There are some other things, but that's a really good case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Bert. Yeah, appreciate it. Do you do this for well water? Yeah, even if you're on well water, we're happy to take it. Have you had your well test yet? No. You've not, okay, okay, right. No, well, this will help us keep you, these are the things,
Like I said, I would like to keep it, but my question is, in order to get the blood test and have insurance coverage, is there a place I should maybe start with, like doctor?
yeah, so I would start with your doctor. If your doctor doesn't know where to get the test done, this analytic is a laboratory in California that you have to have your blood drawn and sent to them. I'd be happy to have further discussions with you if you have a hard time with them. The hard part for me has been finding the draw, not getting the lab. Lab is great. Being new here to order the test.
I know my blood work is all done at UMass.
Okay.
They just got their own lab, they used to have to send it to either New Mexico or California.
Right.
So I'll check it.
Okay, yeah, and look, I mean, if you'd like to, discuss any of this, we're happy to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yeah. I did for a while. Did you really? I went to 3 high schools, so I was around a lot. Can I go there? So, oh my gosh, yeah, okay. So, hi, how are you? Yeah, so this one. Okay.
And